In a small, forgotten town nestled between dark woods and a silent river, there existed an old mansion known as Hawthorne Manor. Tales of the manor were woven into the fabric of the town's history, recounting the tragic demise of its last resident, Eliza Hawthorne. She was a beautiful woman, deeply beloved for her kindness, but rumored to be cursed. They said that on stormy nights, her spirit roamed the halls, whispering secrets of her sorrow to those who dared to listen. One fateful evening, a group of 4 friends, Mark, Sarah, Jenna, and Tom, decided to explore the long-abandoned manor. They were drawn by the thrill of adventure and the allure of the supernatural. Armed with flashlights and a sense of reckless courage, they approached the weathered facade of the mansion, its windows like dark, hollow eyes watching their every move. As they stepped inside, dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights. The air was thick with time and neglect, and the floor creaked under their weight as if the house itself were alive. The walls were lined with faded portraits of the Hawthorne family, their expressions watching the friends with an unsettling intensity. "Let's split up," Mark suggested, his voice echoing through the empty halls. "We can cover more ground that way." Reluctantly, they agreed. Tom and Sarah headed toward the second floor, while Jenna and Mark stayed on the first. They promised to meet back in an hour, excitement buzzing in the air like electricity. As Mark and Jenna explored the ground floor, they stumbled upon the parlor, where the fireplace was choked with ashes and old embers. In the corner stood an antique mirror, its surface clouded but still reflecting the dim light of their flashlights. "Do you think it's true about Eliza's ghost?" Jenna asked, peering into the mirror. Mark shrugged, still intrigued by the eerie atmosphere. "It's just a story, right?" he laughed, though his voice trembled slightly. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, snuffing out their light for a brief moment. When the flashlight flickered back on, they both gasped. In the mirror behind them stood a silhouette of a woman, her long hair cascading like a waterfall of shadows. Heart racing, they turned around, but nothing was there. "Did you see that?" Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yeah, but it was probably just our minds playing tricks," Mark replied, trying to sound brave but feeling a chill crawl up his spine. Meanwhile, upstairs, Sarah and Tom wandered through dusty bedrooms, each room holding secrets of its own. The air felt heavy, the silence almost suffocating. As they entered a room adorned with faded floral wallpaper, Sarah noticed a child's toy lying in the corner, a weathered doll with missing buttons for eyes. "That's creepy," she said, picking it up. "What do you think happened to the child?" "No idea, but it's probably best not to think about it," Tom replied, glancing toward the dark hallway that led to the staircase. As they turned to leave, they heard a faint whispering, like the rustle of leaves intertwining with sorrowful words. It was coming from the hallway. With a nervous glance, Tom decided to investigate. He stepped into the corridor, followed closely by Sarah. "Eliza! Eliza!" The whispers seemed to chant, growing louder and more coherent with each step they took. A sense of dread crept over them. "Maybe we should go back," Sarah suggested, her voice shaking. Before Tom could respond, a door slammed shut at the far end of the hallway, echoing through the house. The whispering stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that filled the air with tension. Back on the ground floor, Mark and Jenna, still shaken by their earlier encounter, were deciding whether to continue exploring when they felt a tremor beneath their feet. The house seemed to have come alive. The floorboards creaked, resembling the sound of footsteps drawing closer. "What if we just wait for them downstairs?" Mark proposed, anxiety bubbling under his skin. Just as they agreed, a chilling sound reverberated through the house, a wailing cry that seemed to emanate from the very walls. They exchanged panicked glances. "We've got to find them," Jenna urged. Together they made their way toward the staircase, their hearts pounding in sync with each step. As they ascended, the air grew colder, thick with an ethereal presence. The whispers returned, clearer now. "Help me. Find me," they echoed, beckoning them deeper into the mansion. Reaching the second floor, they peered into rooms, calling out for Sarah and Tom. In one of the rooms, they found their friends huddled together, fear written across their faces. "There's something here," Tom stammered, his eyes wide with terror. "We heard it calling. We need to leave, now." Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, and the lights flickered ominously. A figure emerged from the shadows, the translucent form of Eliza Hawthorne standing before them, sadness etched into her features. "Help me," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I am trapped. I need you to set me free." Frozen in fear, the friends glanced at one another, uncertainty pooling in their eyes. Mark, trying to summon courage, asked, "How can we help you?" "You must find my locket," Eliza implored, her voice softening as she gestured toward a locked drawer by her feet. "It holds my secret. Only then can I be at peace." With trembling hands, Jenna reached for the drawer and found it stubbornly locked. "Do any of you have a key?" she asked. Tom rummaged through his pockets and found an old rusted key, a relic he had picked up from the manor's entrance. When he inserted it into the lock, it clicked open. Inside the drawer, they found a tarnished locket filled with dried petals and remnants of letters, each speaking of dreams unfulfilled and a life cut short. As they held it in the light, Eliza's spirit began to shimmer, her expression shifting from sorrow to gratitude. "Thank you. Now I can finally rest," she whispered as the air thickened with light, enveloping her. The essence of her being dissipated into the ether, leaving a warm glow behind. The friends stood in stunned silence as the house sighed, the oppressive energy lifting, the air no longer filled with dread. It was as if the mansion itself had exhaled a breath it had been holding for decades. As they made their way downstairs, they felt lighter, the chill of fear replaced with a sense of peace. They knew they had helped a tormented soul find its way home. Once outside the manor, the sun began to rise, casting golden rays over the landscape. The friends took one last look at Hawthorne Manor, now seemingly just an old house, no longer haunted by sorrow. They walked away, forever changed by the night, knowing that some stories, however tragic, had the power to set the soul free. And though Eliza's whispers would no longer echo through the halls, her spirit would forever be grateful, at peace in the only way she had longed to be. On the outskirts of a small forgotten town, the remnants of a once lively circus stood in eerie silence. The faded tents, tattered and flapping in the chilling wind, were all that remained of the Great Solano's traveling circus. It had been nearly a decade since the circus mysteriously vanished overnight, leaving behind only whispers and rumors that danced like shadows through the town's narrow streets. Samantha, an adventurous young woman with a thirst for the unknown, had heard the chilling tales of the circus from the townspeople. They spoke of laughter that turned to screams and performers who had seemingly vanished into thin air. Intrigued, she decided to explore the abandoned grounds one fateful autumn evening, driven by a mix of bravery and curiosity. As she approached the dilapidated entrance, the air turned cold, and a sense of foreboding wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. The large archway, once vibrant and splashed with colors, now lay cracked and worn. "Welcome to the greatest show on earth," it read, the words barely legible. Samantha hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest, but the thrill of adventure pushed her inside. The gravel crunched under her feet as she walked through the empty fairgrounds. Broken rides stood still, swallowed by weeds and underbrush that had taken over. She made her way to the main tent, its striped fabric tattered and stained, fluttering ominously in the evening breeze. Peeking inside, her heart skipped a beat. The vast interior was littered with remnants of the past, a cracked mirror ball, old props, and dusty animal cages, long empty. As she ventured deeper into the tent, a sudden chill swept through the air, and Samantha shivered. "Just the wind," she whispered to herself. But as she turned to leave, she heard it, a faint melody, a haunting, whimsical tune that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Instinctively drawn to it, she followed the sound, her heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. The melody led her to a smaller tent, tucked away in the shadows. The entrance was partially covered by overgrown vines, but she pushed through them, determined to uncover the source of the sound. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with despair and nostalgia, and the melody swelled to a crescendo. In the center of the tent was an old, dusty music box perched on a rickety table. Samantha approached, mesmerized. She reached out and gently opened the box, and the music filled the tent, echoing ominously off the walls. As the notes danced around her, a chill ran down her spine. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, twisting and writhing as if alive. Before she could comprehend what was happening, faint outlines began to materialize in the dim light. Figures dressed in tattered circus costumes emerged, their faces pale and eyes hollow. They were the lost souls of the circus, forever trapped in a world that had forgotten them. Samantha's breath quickened as she realized these were the performers from the tales, the clowns, acrobats, and animal tamers, all bearing expressions of sadness and despair. One figure stepped forward, a tall woman with wild hair and a cracked smile, her voice echoing in a hollow whisper. "Help us. We were cursed by a darkness that lingers here. Our laughter turned to screams as we were bound to this place, and now we can only exist in shadows." Samantha's mind raced. "What do you mean? How can I help?" Fear gnawed at her, but she couldn't turn away from their pleas. "The music box is the key," the woman continued, her voice twisted with anguish. "You must find the source of the curse and destroy it. Only then can we be free." With newfound determination, Samantha nodded. The music box's melody echoed in her mind as she sought answers. She ventured deeper into the circus's depths, her heart pounding with every step. The shadows followed closely behind, whispering secrets and sorrowful tales of despair. Following the music led her to the old carousel, now but a forgotten relic of joy. As she approached, the melody intensified, matching the rhythm of her pounding heart. The horses, once vibrant and alive, stood still, their glassy eyes watching her intently. Samantha could almost hear the laughter of children, intermingled with haunting wails. She noticed a strange figure emerging from the shadows beside the carousel, a dark silhouette twisted and menacing. It was the source of the curse, a being shrouded in shadows, its eyes glowing with malice. "You should not have come here, little girl," it hissed, its voice a rasp of decay. "This is my domain, and you are not welcome." Samantha felt paralyzed with fear, but she thought of the lost souls and their desperation. Summoning all her courage, she took a step closer. "I will free you," she yelled defiantly. "You cannot keep them trapped here." In an instant, the figure lunged at her, but Samantha was ready. She clutched the music box tightly, the melody becoming a shield around her. In a moment of clarity, she remembered the legends. Fear was the darkness's fuel, but love and bravery could conquer it. With a fierce shout, she opened the music box wide and faced the darkness. The melody erupted into a powerful symphony, lifting the spirits of the trapped performers. Their sorrow transformed into strength, and they joined forces with Samantha, creating a luminous barrier of light. The dark figure screeched, its form flickering as the light intensified. "No, you cannot escape," it shrieked, clawing at the barrier. But Samantha pressed on, pouring her heart into the melody, channeling all her courage and determination. The shadows recoiled, and with one final burst, the light shattered the darkness, sending a blinding wave throughout the carnival grounds. Silence fell upon the circus. When the light dimmed, Samantha found herself alone in the tent. The music box closed and still. The air felt lighter, and a sense of peace washed over her. The performers, free at last, had vanished, leaving behind only whispers of their presence and gratitude. Samantha exited the tent, her heart filled with both sorrow and joy. The circus stood still, but its once dreadful energy had shifted. The shadows were no longer lurking, and as she made her way out, she felt a sense of closure, an end to the suffering that had permeated the air for so long. As she reached the entrance, she turned back for one last look. The tents fluttered softly in the breeze, and in the distance she could almost hear the echoes of laughter, a promise of new beginnings woven into the fabric of legends. With a smile and a heart full of memories, Samantha left the abandoned circus, knowing that in its quiet corners, the spirit of the great Solano's traveling circus would finally find peace. On a chilly autumn evening in the small town of Willow Creek, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the deserted streets. The leaves crunched underfoot, and an eerie silence settled over the neighborhood. It was the end of October, and Halloween was just around the corner. The excitement in the air, however, was overshadowed by an unsettling legend that had haunted the town for generations. At the center of this legend was School Bus 17, the old yellow bus that kids rode to Willow Creek High. It wasn't just any bus. It was known for its strange occurrences and unexplainable events. A few years back, the bus was involved in a tragic accident that claimed the lives of several students. Since then, whispers of ghostly sightings and mysterious happenings surrounded it like a fog. Despite the warnings of parents and elders, a group of brave teenagers decided to test the legend. Jake, the leader of the group, was known for his fearless attitude and love for a good scare. Alongside him were Emily, his adventurous girlfriend, Tom, the jokester, and Sarah, the skeptic. They had all heard the stories, but they were determined to prove that it was just a myth. "Let's meet at the old bus yard at midnight," Jake suggested, his eyes glinting with excitement. The others nodded, albeit a bit nervously. As the clock struck midnight, the group arrived at the abandoned bus yard, which was notorious for its dilapidated vehicles and an overwhelming sense of dread. The moon cast an eerie glow over the rusting buses, but none was as imposing as School Bus 17. Its faded yellow paint chipped away, and the windows were clouded with grime, making it look like a forgotten relic. "Are you guys ready for this?" Jake asked, pulling open the bus's creaky door. The others hesitated, but their curiosity pushed them forward. They climbed aboard, their footsteps echoing in the hollow shell of the bus. Inside, it smelled of mildew and rust, and the stained seats testified to years of neglect. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The group jumped, exchanging startled glances. "Very funny, Tom," Emily said, crossing her arms. "I swear I didn't do anything," Tom protested, looking just as scared as the rest. Jake shrugged it off, trying to maintain his bravado. "Come on, let's just sit down and tell some ghost stories," he suggested, plopping himself onto a seat near the back. As they settled in, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and an oppressive silence enveloped them. They took turns sharing ghost stories, but the mood was increasingly tense, the reality of their situation creeping in. Eventually, Sarah spoke up, breaking the growing tension. "What if we called it a night? This feels wrong." "No way," Jake replied, his voice laced with excitement. "We can't leave yet. We need to stay until at least 1 or 2. Just then, Emily noticed something unusual. "Guys, look outside," she pointed as a fog began to rise around the bus. It swirled and twisted, creeping closer until it engulfed the yard. Visibility dropped and they could barely see a foot outside the bus. "This is creepy," Tom whispered, biting his lip. Suddenly, the bus engine roared to life, vibrating under them. The group screamed, unsure of what was happening. The lights flickered on, illuminating the interior, and the bus began to move, slowly at first, but then picking up speed. "Jake, what did you do?" Emily shouted, panic evident in her voice. "Nothing. I'm not driving this thing," Jake replied, his bravado dissipating. The bus jolted forward, barreling down an unseen road. The teenagers clung to their seats as it careened through the fog, twisting and turning as if it had a mind of its own. Shadows danced outside the windows, and odd whispering voices seemed to float through the air around them. "Let me out! Let me out!" Sarah screamed, pounding on the door. But it wouldn't budge. The panic mounted as the shadows outside morphed into ghostly figures, their faces twisted in anguish, reaching out towards the bus. "What is happening?" Tom yelled, his voice cracking. "I think we're not alone," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. As the bus rounded a corner, they saw a flickering light ahead. It resembled the entrance to Willow Creek Graveyard, a location where many of the town's lost souls were buried. Time seemed to stand still as the bus came to a stop at the graveyard gate, the fog thickening around them. With a final shudder, the engine died, and the lights flickered off. The interior of the bus plunged into darkness. The only sound was their heavy breathing and the distant echo of haunting laughter. Jake fumbled for his phone, the screen illuminating his scared face as he shone it around the bus. But before he could speak, the door swung open, and a chilling breeze rushed in. Outside, the graveyard was eerily illuminated by ghostly lights, and the silhouettes of the lost souls danced among the graves. "Get out!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with terror as she rushed toward the door. One by one they followed, terrified of what awaited them outside, yet desperate to escape the claustrophobic bus. As they stepped outside, they were greeted by the mournful sounds of the spirits, their whispers echoing in the air. The figures hovered just beyond the bus, their eyes hollow and mouths agape as they let out desperate wails that clawed at the teenagers' sanity. "Let's run," Jake urged, but before they could even think about escaping, the spirits surged forward, blocking their path. "Help us," one spirit whispered, its voice sorrowful and chilling. "Free us from this torment." Emily backed away in fear, realizing that the stories were true. The spirits were those of the children lost in the accident, trapped in a cycle of torment, and the bus was their prison. In that moment, Jake understood. They had to help. "What do we need to do?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Remember us," the spirits wailed in unison. "Tell our story. Honor our memory." The teenagers looked at one another, their fear shifting into resolve. With a newfound determination, they nodded in agreement. "We will," Emily promised, tears streaming down her face. "We'll make sure the town remembers you." As the spirits began to fade, they felt a wave of gratitude wash over them. The bus behind them creaked and rattled as if acknowledging their promise. The fog lifted, revealing the stars above. Back on the bus, the lights turned back on, and the engine roared to life one last time. The doors swung shut as if releasing them. The bus rolled back into the yard, coming to a stop exactly where it had been moments before. Stunned but relieved, the teenagers stepped off the bus. The world around them felt lighter, the burden of the spirits lifted. They quickened their pace home, hearts racing but minds made up. The next day, they visited the local cemetery, where they found the names engraved on the gravestones. Each name held a story, a life cut short. They spent hours there, sharing what they learned and vowing to never let those stories fade away. As Halloween approached, the town of Willow Creek came alive with festivities. However, the tales of the past lingered in every whisper of wind and every flickering light. But thanks to 4 brave teenagers, the memory of School Bus 17 and its lost souls would never be forgotten. And each year, on the night of Halloween, the bus would roam the streets of Willow Creek, taking on a new meaning, a symbol of remembrance rather than sorrow. The spirits were free at last, and their story would live on, etched in the hearts of those who dared to listen. Once upon a time, in a small, forgotten village surrounded by a dense forest known as the Whispering Woods, there lay tales of eerie happenings. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the dark shadows that roamed the trees at night and the whispers that floated on the chilly breeze. Few dared to venture into the woods after sunset, as those who had ventured too deep often never returned. One autumn evening, a young girl named Clara, curious and adventurous, decided she would uncover the mysteries of the forest. Ignoring her grandmother's warnings about the dark magic that lingered within, she gathered her courage and set off just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. As Clara entered the woods, the towering trees enveloped her, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal hands. With each step, the air grew heavier, and the sunlight faded into shadows. Clara clutched her flashlight, its beam slicing through the growing darkness. A chill ran down her spine, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As Clara ventured deeper, she noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols carved into the bark, twisted faces that seemed to shift in the flickering light. A low humming sound began to fill the air, almost like a lullaby, but with an unsettling undertone. Clara stopped to listen, her heart racing. It felt as if the forest was alive, whispering secrets she had no right to hear. "Clara," a soft voice called from the shadows. She turned abruptly, heart pounding. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice wavering. No answer came, but the whispers intensified, a chorus of lost souls calling her name. She backed away, feeling more frightened than ever. Her logical mind battled with the chilling reality around her. It was just the wind, she thought, trying to convince herself. But deep down, she knew something was very wrong. Suddenly, the humming shifted into a loud wail, and Clara stumbled backward, catching herself against a tree. The tree was unnaturally cold and seemed to pulse beneath her hand, as if it were breathing. Panic gripped her. She turned to run, but the forest had shifted. What had been a familiar path was now a maze of twisting branches and dense foliage. Lost and terrified, Clara called out, "Help! Is anyone there?" Just then, she heard a rustling behind her. She turned slowly, her flashlight illuminating a figure. It was a woman draped in tattered white cloth, with hollow eyes and a mouth that seemed to open in a silent scream. Clara could feel the woman's sorrow, heavy and palpable in the air. The woman pointed a bony finger deeper into the woods, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. Without thinking, Clara ran in the opposite direction, but the whispers became screams, echoing around her. "Leave while you can," they warned, "before the forest claims you too." Clara ran until her legs burned and her breath came in ragged gasps. The trees around her twisted and contorted as if they were alive, reaching out to snatch her. Shadows danced just beyond her periphery, and Clara could hear the rusting of leaves, like footsteps pursuing her. In her frantic escape, Clara stumbled into a small clearing, bathed in eerie moonlight. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and adorned with more of the strange symbols. She approached it, sensing a strange pull, as if it held the answers she sought. The whispers quieted, and an unsettling calm enveloped the clearing. As Clara touched the altar, she was overwhelmed with visions, flashes of the villagers from long ago, standing here, performing dark rituals to the forest. Their faces twisted in agony, begging for mercy. A shiver ran through her. The forest was a prison, feeding off the souls of those who had entered and never returned. Realizing she had to escape, Clara turned to leave, but a figure blocked her path. The woman in white now stood before her, more solid than before. "You must not leave," the woman whispered, her voice echoing through Clara's mind. "You are part of the forest now." Clara felt the ground beneath her shift. Roots began to wrap around her feet, pulling her closer to the altar. Screams filled her ears as the spirits of the lost surged around her, pleading for release. "Help us," they cried. "Help us find peace." Summoning her courage, Clara reached deep within herself, embracing the pain of all those trapped in the woods. "I won't let you take me," she shouted, breaking the hold of the roots. With fierce determination, she focused on the memories of her home, her family, and her grandmother's warnings. The whispers turned into screams of rage as Clara surged with light, pushing against the darkness that surrounded her. In a flash, everything went quiet. The roots released her and she stumbled back. The woman in white faded away, her expression one of sorrow mixed with gratitude. Clara ran, propelled by sheer will, leaving the clearing behind. The forest seemed to shift and twist, trying to hinder her escape, but Clara pushed forward, not daring to look back. The trees parted for her as she fought through the darkness, until finally she burst through the tree line and into the safety of the village. She collapsed at her grandmother's feet, gasping for breath. The old woman looked down at her, eyes wide with fear. "Oh, my dear, you've returned." Clara grasped her grandmother's hand, the warmth of home washing over her like a comforting blanket. From that day on, Clara would share her story with the villagers, warning them about the whispering woods that stood just outside their door. The tales changed, but the forest remained a haunting presence, a reminder that not all mysteries were meant to be unraveled. The trees would always whisper, keeping the secrets of the lost souls, forever guarding the darkness hidden within the woods, waiting for the next curious heart to wander too deep. And sometimes, on moonlit nights, villagers would claim they could still hear Clara's name being whispered among the trees.